You guys, welcome to another episode of Soft Rebellion. My name is Ntache, and thank you so much for joining me. So, I was talking to someone I went to primary school with. We went to grade 9 together, and this is when I had changed schools to be closer to my dad, my biological dad. And turns out this girl and I had such similar life experiences in regards to our families, our dad stories, and like just a lot of drama that I'll one day talk about. And now I'm talking to my little sister, right? But I'm realizing in light of the episode I recorded about my relationship with my dad, for a very long time, there's certain things I didn't do out of respect for the elders, right? Out of respect for my dad, my mom, and grandparents. But it suddenly occurred to me that Sana parents do the most, including grandparents. They just do the most. I can't even come up with practical examples. Like, I've also been going through the rabbit hole of family dramas on TikTok, people sharing stories about just the most bizarre things that are taking place in their families, and it got me thinking about the dramas in my family. And I can't, for the life of me, figure out why we were so ashamed as kids to be kids and to explore and be curious, because we never wanted to disappoint our parents and our family members when they've done the most. Guys, like, I think about how quote unquote promiscuous parents are, and yet at the side of even so much as looking in the direction of a boy, you would be shamed for that. I think to this day, I'm still so fearful of relationships and letting men in, because somehow I just inherited that trauma. Like, when they said run away from boys, I really internalized it to the extent that I'm fearful of men. Yes, there's also other experiences where men have threatened physical violence and other forms of violence against me, which has made me less trusting towards them. But I also think the foundational phase of that was being told to stay away from men, because I'd get pregnant and my life wouldn't amount to anything. And I've taken that, and somehow it hasn't yet clicked. Yes, I know, I'm very much aware that simply talking to a boy or liking them or whatever the case is not going to ruin my life. But I think my younger self, my inner child, is still holding on to that, And because I grew up under such impoverished circumstances, my life amounting to anything was the greatest threat. And the fear of poverty is still what drives me today. Stephen talks about, are you driven or is something dragging you? And I think that fear is what drags me. But on top of that, it's, teachings from parents about relationships and how we perceive men, right? And I think it's very clear to see that in my engagements with men, even though I try to unlearn some of those, teachings, or rather the fear that came with the teachings. And it's hard. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's hard. And I know this is not everyone's experience, but for some reason, the fear of it all just took root in me. And I suppose I haven't gotten rid of it, at least not completely. And then the other element is the shame that's associated with, say, for instance, being pregnant when you're still going to school when you're a teenager, or being pregnant out of wedlock, having multiple kids by different men, or whatever other, life experience is associated with shame. I'd even say, even if you're not pregnant, like just being a single woman who's unmarried carries a bit of shame to a certain extent, because it implies that you're not desirable. It implies that someone hasn't chosen you. No one wants you in that way, such that people would even settle with people's husbands, or like the idea of cheating then, or whatever the case is, something that as a society we've deemed to be inappropriate. People, almost play in those gray areas, and sometimes the very clear lines of what's right and wrong as per societal expectations. We are very comfortable crossing those boundaries, because being found out is better than the shame that comes from not having been chosen. And although those strong moral values were being taught to us growing up, but when we look back at what our grandparents did and what our parents did, it's like, on what grounds did you instill or even try to instill those values in me? Because your own life shows a very different set of value systems. You know what I mean? The idea that a man will try to, enforce women to comply to, these conservative ideas of how they should live and maintain themselves, whereas they go out there sleeping around, doing all sorts of things. I just don't get it. And I mean, as I was talking to a friend of mine, and I know I'm switching to quite a lot of different stories at once, I hope you guys can keep up. But as I was talking to this friend of mine who had similar life experiences to me, she's not a friend actually, it's just an acquaintance, I suppose. We had gone to the same schools, she comes from my dad's rural area, and we just happened to have life experiences which I didn't know about until recently. But I suppose because my story is out there and she knows about it, she reached out, and she really needed to unburden herself, and she felt so much better afterwards. But I think her plight then was the discomfort that comes with choosing her family, her paternal side's family, over the family that her mom was married into, and them reprimanding her for, almost flaunting this relationship that she's got with her biological family, which could potentially bring shame to her mom, who was married in that other family, and or maybe then was unfaithful to their dad, or whatever the case is. And I just thought to myself, but those very same people who were making her feel bad about her own choices to embrace her paternal family, her biological family, have their own shenanigans, you know what I mean? But somehow they just have double standards about holding on to this other standard that they've decided matters more than whatever they do. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I just feel like as a society, no one has a moral authority to place judgments on anyone. And that's why I don't get countries making these laws about controlling people's bodily autonomy, or sexual expression, sexuality, and other forms of identities that people deem as important to them, but government for some reason wants to regulate. And I can bet you they commit some of the most atrocious things in that contravene these very standards they're trying to enforce, you know what I mean? And yeah, it just dawned on me, and I'm like, guys, in this society that we live in, you can't afford to be fearful or not make certain decisions because you're scared people will judge you. Chances are those very people also have their own zgigabas, they have their own loads to bear, and it's not your responsibility to carry their shame or the shame that they try to place on you for the decisions that you are making or for the circumstances in which you find yourself, and I'm coming to terms with this as someone who carries shame a lot. Like, it matters to me that I can go to bed at night and sleep peacefully without ruminating over something I did wrong. But I think I'm also getting to a point where people's opinions of me don't matter. And luckily, I got to that place much sooner in life than most people. There was another girl, we worked together in Pretoria, and she says, you won't believe that I'm still so fearful of so many things. And when I look at you and you expressing your views publicly with no fear, I get inspired, and I'm like, but why are you so fearful? And thing is, she's one of the most smartest people I've ever come across. She's so humble. I have no idea why she would be so fearful. But I know society punishes people who are outspoken, especially if those views, contradict what the societal norm is. But I suppose in the age of social media, people always find something to be mad about, even if you try to be neutral in your stance, But yeah, I really think the moment of rebellion, of self-rebellion for me, is to live your life either way, with no fear of disappointing your parents, of disappointing your grandparents, or anyone in your life, because best believe they've had their own fair share of poor decision making, poor judgment, or moral corruption of some sort. And I dislike using those words, but since they drive the point home, I hope you guys catch the message. And it's your life, you know what I mean? It's your life, and you need to be able to own the decisions you've made much later on without pointing to whoever would have judged you, At the end of the day, I think when you look back, none of that matters. You're only filled with regrets if you don't make the choices you want for fear of other people's judgment or being perceived in a particular way. People will always form judgments about whatever you do, good or bad. Someone will always have an opinion, and someone will always disagree no matter what. So rather make yourself happy in the process, because you will have disagreements no matter what anyway, So yeah, I just had that thought, and I hope you guys can find resonance with it, or it gives you the motivation to make your decisions, because you have to live with them. If you've got regrets later on, you will have to live with those regrets, and unfortunately you can't rewind time, and there won't be any opportunity for you to redo your actions or even inactions. I think it would be better to make a mistake rather than not act at all, because at least with a mistake, it's input, it's feedback, and you know what to improve next time. But when you don't act and you're just paralyzed by the fear, you in the same position that you were yesterday or 10 years ago, and before you know it, it's too late. There's nothing you can do. So yeah, don't let your family, even those people you admire the most, those people you think are perfect, they're your role models, people you look up to. Guys, everyone is just going through the most, to be quite honest. We're all trying to make the best of this life situation we find ourselves in, and no one has it figured out. I think the more I live, the more I realize that everyone is just trying their best, Some people aren't even trying anymore, but no one has the formula. No one has the formula. So just live according to your own rules. You know what I mean? Yeah, just live according to your own rules. Other people's opinions, they're not gonna take you anywhere. Absolutely no way. And yeah, it's interesting how much people hide actually behind these values. And I think the assumption we make is that because someone is older, they know best or they are better, but that's not necessarily the case. I think when I think about my own parents, I realize that they're just flawed as humans as much as I am. And luckily I realized that much sooner, and it liberated me to be able to live my own life, without caring that, oh, I need to make my mom proud. Of course, I love it when I make my mom proud, and I do, but that's not my point of departure for any decision making. I don't live my life on the basis of making my mom proud. She becomes proud as a consequence of the decisions I've made. You know what I mean? That's secondary to what my true desires and hopes and dreams are. It just so happens that she is proud in the process. That said, there's also some decisions that don't necessarily make her proud, that are quite disappointing to her, you know. I think the piercing was a big one, like a septum piercing. My mom loathed it. And she used to tease me about it, but eventually she got used to it because I had it straight for 5 years and I'd never taken it out. Only this year did I take out that ring, and she was so happy. But by then she had gotten over it. It wasn't even a point of discussion anymore. And then there were tattoos. She saw the first one, super disappointed. By the time she saw the second one, she barely had any reaction. You know what I mean? And I think those experiences, although disappointing to her, were testament that I'm living my life for me, you know, and I'm being true to myself. Whether she gets disappointed or not, is of no consequence to me. Yes, of course, I don't enjoy disappointing my mom, but I matter to me first before anyone else, you know. And I think I'd just really like to remind you guys of that. And yeah, live your lives, chummies. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate each and every one of you being here. I appreciate the follows. I appreciate the downloads. Oh my gosh. I think tomorrow or the day after is officially going to be a month since I started this podcast and published my first episode. Excuse me, which was like 5 minutes long or something. In fact, it was the trailer, so it was even shorter than that. I think 1:30 seconds. And you guys have been so incredibly supportive since then, and I'm so excited to close off the month with 11 episodes and 1,000 downloads. Insane. And oh my goodness, the adverts as well. I can't stop laughing or smiling every time I see those adverts because it's so surreal to me. And I'm also glad that from the day I recorded the previous episodes, I've grown by like an entire 1 cent, guys. Now I've got 0.32 cents in ad revenue. How crazy. Exciting stuff. Anyway, thank you guys, and I appreciate all of you engaging me. Please leave a review, a comment, something. I'm really keen to hear from you guys and what you think of the content, what's happening in your lives, anything you'd like me to touch on. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.